Hey all, so we're back with another Spotlight with Context. We're going to try and do all three of these in a row. Today we're talking about Negasonic Teenage Warhead, a rather silly, elaborate name until you learn that her given name is Eloise Femister. Yeah, I think the nickname is better. Anyway, I'm probably going to be calling her Negasonic on streams, so I'm going to stick to that through a lot of this. Very silly mutant character, made popular by the Deadpool series. Base stats and abilities, she has significantly less health than normal. Pretty solid. Prestige, she's above Namor, but as a mutant, that does mean she's going to be behind Sunspot and Gambit with their weird scaling, but definitely a solid investment for the long term. Just to call that out. We can move right into the champion attributes here. Survivability of 3. Like we just said, if she actually gets hit, she doesn't have a lot to deal with it, but her evade ability is quite powerful. That helps. She can parry more reliably because it's a passive stun rather than a debuff, and that means that she's less likely to need to just ride block. And then the combination of those two probably puts her at about a 3. Damage of 3.5. There is some significant nuke potential here, honestly, if you play things correctly, build up to a heavy attack, cancel into a special 2, and then hold on to those incinerates. In longer fights where you can hold on to more incinerates, the DPS can actually get pretty nuts. She's very fun to chase in that way, but there is definitely a ceiling there, so don't go expecting sunspot damage, right? You want to build up the incinerates and hold on to them. Ease of use 4, she is pretty simple to play. We just talked about accessing the higher levels of her damage, holding on to it longer, holding on to it well enough that you can then build it higher. There is a definite upper level of playing her, but the basics are pretty simple. The basics are you do 5-hit combos against the opponent, you throw special attacks, ideally you heavy cancel into those special attacks periodically, and you just watch the opponent melt. So it can definitely get behind ease of use 4 here. Utility of 3.5, she doesn't really have abilities that do specific utility-oriented things, right? She doesn't have a whole lot going on in her kit that says, hey, use me for that over there. I turn off that ability. She doesn't have any immunities. What she does have is a complete set that doesn't make contact, which gets around anything that requires contact to be made, like thorns, and she doesn't apply any debuffs, which has some ups and downs, but is mostly a large strength. So pretty much all of her significant utility score comes from that, and it's going to come in handy all over the place. Defender strength of 3. There's not a ton of threat here. The special 1 and special 2 have to hit you to apply their incinerates, but their animations are a little bit tricky. There's a lot of fire going on. They can catch you, and you have to be able to parry non-contacts to actually stun her. So between those two things, I think 3 is probably about fair. She's not that bad. I wouldn't expect her to go on Battlegrounds defense very often. But if you're forced into placing her and your opponent doesn't have a counter, she might slow them down enough for you to eke out a win. Moving on to strengths and weaknesses. We've already talked about this. The main one is no contact attacks, no debuffs. There are a lot of things that punish one or the other, and she just sidesteps them. That is really the core of her strength. She also has very easy access to Incinerate. She has it on all of her mediums and her special attacks. Technically, someone like Sunspot has access to more, but she's definitely one of the best incinerators in the game, and she can hold on to them for a very, very long time, as long as you play properly. Additionally, she is very good specifically against counter evades. Bullseye is the most famous one at the moment, but there are a bunch of other annoying ones out there, such as Mordo, Kate Bishop, even Wasp. It comes up. And then weaknesses, Like we said, a lot of her damage is getting incinerates and then holding on to it, and all of her attacks deal energy damage. So incinerate immunity or significant energy resistance is going to slow her way, way down, and I generally would not recommend doing that. Additionally, a large part of her survivability and overall utility comes from her evade. If her evade is prevented, she can't do that. So obviously a weakness. And then there are times in our game, especially against some mystics, where you do want access to debuffs. She doesn't have any, right? There isn't a way to opt into dealing a debuff. She just doesn't have them, right? She doesn't even have access to the Resonate Mastery, which is a way that some characters get access to incidental debuffs, because the Resonate Mastery requires you to make contact, and all of her attacks are non-contact. So that's not going to be a major weakness all the time, but it is going to come up, right? It also means that she has no access to Despair, to Pacify, to Petrify, to Inequity. All of those are going to sometimes work against her. It's a worthy trade, but I do want to call out the downsides. Moving on to her abilities themselves. First off, we just list the various passives she can inflict in her kit. All of these will be referenced later. You have this base Incinerate, which has a max stacks of 40, that's important, and 14 seconds. That's also important because you're going to want to refresh them. Incinerate Vulnerability doesn't stack, but is 50% potency, so you're definitely going to want to chase that before you start stacking too many Incinerates, and this lasts for 16 seconds. And then Stun, lasts 2 seconds. Remember, all of these are passive, so a passive 2-second stun is incredibly helpful. And if the Parry Mastery is active, it inflicts this particular stun. Talking about her various attacks, they all deal energy damage and do not make contact. Like we've kind of already touched on, this means that she dodges pretty much all Thorn's mechanics. Those just never come up against her, and there are a number of places where dealing energy damage is very helpful. There are also some places where dealing energy damage is bad, though, to call it out, so I would not use her against someone like Torch or Bishop. She is one of those characters that you have to watch for. Her medium 1 inflicts an Incinerate when it lands, as long as the opponent has fewer than 5 currently on them. Now that's important because it means the medium is going to ramp you outside of your specials, but then once you get rolling, this isn't going to ramp anymore. And then the light attacks become more important because the light attacks pause any active Incinerates or Incinerate vulnerabilities for 1.5 seconds. So once you get rolling with her, you're probably going to switch over to medium, light, 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 light combos instead of ending with your mediums, just to hold on to all of those Incinerates that much better. Precognition is her evade counterattack. She enters each fight with this charge. It allows her to evade an attack and then counter, inflicting a stun. Somewhat similar to how Kate's riposte works, right? This evade won't activate while blocking. Normally, it only has a 15% chance against mediums and lights, but those mediums and lights have to make contact. Don't try and use her against somebody with non-contact hits and hope that her counter will work. And this is increased to 100% while charging a heavy. So again, those attacks need to make contact. You don't want to charge a heavy with Negasonic against somebody like Havoc and hope that she will evade. It actually needs to make contact for her to do this whole evade counter thing. And then, separately, she has a 100% chance to evade an opponent's counterattack. This is not restricted to counterattacks that make contact. This is just when a counterattack is incoming and she's not blocking, she will evade. Taking a moment to flip over to considering her on defense, this evade can be annoying, right? 15% is a decently high chance. It makes it tricky to combo into somebody, especially when they can evade and stun you. That's going to hurt. But note that if you have the ability to not make contact with your hits. I just called out Havoc as one possibility. Shuri is another one who's quite good for her. Those can't be evaded. And her heavy attack is counterable. And so if you counter her heavy with a heavy, that can't be evaded either. It's just lights and mediums. Now, this next section talks about the various rules for precognition going on to cooldown, which are very important both on offense and defense. Whenever her evade activates or is prevented from activating, precog goes on cooldown for 25 seconds. So this means that if you prevent it with, a true effect, a cold snap, just the existence of ghost, any of those will put the evade on cooldown and you won't have to worry about it for a while. It also goes on cooldown when she's knocked down. Remember, we just covered the fact that her heavy can be countered with a heavy, which will knock her down and put it on cooldown and allow you to hit her freely. Or whenever she's inflicted with Power Burn, Drain, or Power Lock. So there are a bunch of techs that can do one of these effects some way or another. Viv Vision is one particularly strong one for easy access to Power Drain. Somebody like Penny Power Locks on every block. You have answers, right? However, each time the opponent lands a critical hit, including through block, this cooldown is shortened, right? So anybody who lands a lot of crits will find themselves having to put it back on cooldown more often. A lot of those techs are going to be able to do that, but you want to watch for it. And anyone who doesn't have crits is going to have just that much more of an edge. Additionally, while fighting tech champions, precog begins on cooldown, so you have a significant amount of time, that 25 seconds if you're not landing crits, to get some control of the fight and line yourself up to knock her down again and get that much more control, right? However, while fighting skill champions specifically, because that is where she's supposed to have the best access to her precognition, the opponent's bleed, evade, and true effects suffer from 100% ability accuracy, and precognition does not go on cooldown specifically when evading a counterattack. So obviously, this is pretty bullseye focused, right? Reducing the ability accuracy of his evade doesn't work. Killer Instinct's effects are all protected from ability accuracy, but your precognition will not go on cooldown, meaning you can keep using it as he tries to counterattack. He won't activate the true accuracy on his special one, and all of his bleed abilities will not happen. So all of those are incredibly helpful against him. They're also going to come up in a few other places, right? He's not the only skill champion who has annoying evades. Moving on to her heavy attack. It can be charged longer than normal, giving you a better window to have opponents come in and trigger your evade. The first hit inflicts an Incinerate vulnerability. It has more than one hit, so you can safely land that first hit and then cancel into your specials, which will now deal 50% stronger Incinerates because of this vulnerability. The special 1 refreshes all personal Incinerates on the first hit, even if blocked. As the dev notes call out, this means that if you are in danger of running out a bunch of Incinerates, you can throw the special 1 into block. That is obviously a risky maneuver that can get you punished. However, if your precognition is on cooldown, you can try to go directly into a heavy charge after the special 1 ends, and that gives you a 100% chance of evading the inevitable punishment, and then you can be good to go, right? Obviously, once you do this, it will go on cooldown, so you can't just do this every time you're trying to refresh your Incinerates, but it's a technique worth mastering to hold on to her ramp. And then after that first hit, each hit inflicts another Incinerate, so this is a nice, safe ramping special. The special 2 is your hyper ramping special, right? After the first hit, you rapidly press block to build up dormant Incinerates, and then all of them are inflicted by the final hit. If you have trouble rapidly pressing block, or you just don't want to deal with it, then you get a random roll between 4 and 12. So the ceiling is higher going for all 16, and I can tell you it's very possible. But when playing, I do have to personally do the thing where I move my index and middle finger from my right hand over to the left side of the screen, and I double tap with them, and that's how I get to 16. So if you find that that's just messing up your flow badly, don't worry about it. She will ramp off of this even if you can't engage with the minigame at all. It's also worth calling down that there is a slight time dilation right when you should start mashing the block button, so keep an eye out for that. Before we go on, we should touch on the basic loop. What you're going to want to do is generally heavy cancel into the special 2, spam block, build up your 16 incinerates, you apply them, and then you are just going to want to spam special 1, right? It will continue to ramp you. When you can, throw your heavy attack and cancel into the special 1 so that you can ramp with bigger incinerates that benefit from the vulnerability, and just keep refreshing. As you go, the skill expression comes from trying to do this as efficiently as possible and not just throw your special 1 as soon as you get it. You want to throw it as late as you can without risking losing the incinerates so that you can have more and more and more power left over, and eventually you throw another special 2. Get a bunch of big incinerates and then go back to the special 1 spam, rinse and repeat, right? So the general fight flow is like special 2, I don't know, 3 or 4 special 1s, special 2, etc. Eventually you're going to hit your cap of 40 incinerates, and then it's just special 1 until the opponent falls over. Talking about the special 3, you're not going to use this very much on offense. It inflicts a stun and an incinerate vulnerability. If for some reason you can't land the heavy, this will let you get that incinerate vulnerability without having to do so. And you automatically get 3 incinerates, and everything lasts longer. Reminder that your incinerate vulnerabilities pause during your light attacks, so this longer than normal incinerate vulnerability that is then paused by lights can last a very long time. Like, I wasn't being flippant when I said if you are having trouble landing your heavy in a fight, the special 3 can be an alternative. This will let you ramp bigger incinerates very reliably. And then touching on the signature ability, big bullet here. As an attacker, Negasonic's evade counterattack inflicts 3 incinerates, so boom, instant ramp with it, rounded up, so that tells you that part scales with sig level, and personal incinerates are paused during her special attacks, which makes building up to a second special 2 much safer, right? Because you're going to hold on to more of the duration of your existing incinerates and have more time to get back to a special 1 to refresh them. Additionally, Striker hits and her counterattack evades pause incinerates and incinerate vulnerabilities as if they were light attacks. So now you can use your Striker to chain out longer combos and more easily get to your special 1 with the incinerate still paused so you can refresh them. Put together the pause during special attacks and the Striker clause, this is a big level up for how fluid her loop feels. And I think it means you kind of need her signature ability. I don't normally say that, but I think there is a big enough impact on how clean her loop is here that if you want to use her on a regular basis, you're gonna want that sig. And then as a defender, start each fight with up to a full bar of power. We already talked about how she's not going to be a very strong defender, but if you get forced into placing her, having her start with a full bar of power, which I already said was a moderately tricky dex, and she has all these non-contact attacks, it might catch someone, right? Especially if they trigger her counter evade, get stunned, and then she nails them with that special she has. So looking at synergies, we have 2 unique ones here. One was already too many, with the various Deadpools that all gain extra bleed and regen potency. Pretty good for all of them. Negasonic herself gets a damage swap where her incinerates are replaced with ruptures that deal 60% of the original potency. These interact with the rest of her kit like incinerates. Now, I know I am definitely going to get some questions. Why are they weaker? Why are the ruptures weaker than the incinerates? There are other characters that have just straight damage swaps. There are. Some of those were probably a mistake, bluntly, but even leaving that aside, I want to point out that we said pretty much her only weakness from a damage standpoint is when the opponent has Incinerate immunity or particularly energy resistance. Swapping from Incinerate, which is an energy dot, to Rupture, which is a physical dot, is a very powerful swap because it means that you can take people who are resistant to all of your damage and have them not be resistant to this new alternate damage type. In our opinion, that is worth reducing the potency because it still makes her much more powerful and flexible. The other unique synergy revivified support group with Human Torch, Phoenix, Moon Knight, and Doctor Strange, who have all been revived, gives them extra health and gives Negasonic an increased chance to evade medium and light attacks while she is below 5% health. So it's not a Heimdall indestructible, but it is a nice little get out of jail free card if you happen to be brought below 5 and aren't already knocked out. And then I don't normally talk about generic synergies, but I will just call out these real quick because she adds a few new ones. Pride with Shield, Hulkling, Wiccan, and America Chavez is a new synergy for our characters associated with Pride Month, right? If any of you feel like that is being forced down your throat and would like to say so in the comments for this video, I'll solve your problem by blocking you from my channel. And then we also are adding acquaintances here with Deadpool Classic, which just gives a little bit extra armor rating and lets us laugh because she only considers Deadpool an acquaintance. And that's Negasonic. Like we talked about earlier, she doesn't have a lot of direct utility. She doesn't reduce the opponent's ability power rate. She doesn't counter miss. She doesn't have immunities, right? But she doesn't apply any debuffs. She can't apply any debuffs. And her attacks don't make contact at all. Those are two very, very powerful things that when combined with the rest of her kit and her ramping damage are definitely going to give her a solid place in the contest going forward. I also think she's really fun to play, and part of it is definitely because she has one of the best block animations in the game. It's so thematic. She's an absolute blast. If you can pick her up, give her a run, and let me know in the comments what you think of this video. Happy to discuss that there. Until next time, thanks so much for watching, and take care.